The billionaire came home early. His gardener grabbed him and whispered, "Don't make a sound." The reason was even more shocking. Ben Falcon didn't build a billion-dollar empire by being careless. At 55, with distinguished silver hair and sharp green eyes that could read a market trend in seconds, he'd transformed a single tech startup into a global powerhouse. His San Francisco estate overlooked the bay, sprawling grounds with manicured gardens, an Olympic pool, and a wine cellar stocked with vintages worth millions. And Carly, his beautiful wife, 42 years old, a former corporate lawyer who'd swept into his life after his first wife's death from cancer. Sophisticated, charming, she understood the language of wealth and power. But Ben didn't see what she really understood. Not yet. October 23rd started like any other executive retreat. 3 days in Seattle for investor meetings. A kiss goodbye to Carly in their marble foyer, and Ben drove his Tesla to the airport. But when severe food poisoning hit him Saturday night at the hotel, the whole retreat became impossible. By Sunday morning, Ben was heading home early, a full day ahead of schedule. He didn't call Carly. Her phone went straight to voicemail. He'd surprise her instead. 6:28 p.m. Ben's rideshare pulled into the circular driveway. He grabbed his overnight bag and headed toward the front entrance. That's when he saw him. Jimmy burst from the side door, moving with desperate urgency. 18 years old, lean and wiry from outdoor work, his face showing pure terror. "Mr. Falcon," he gasped. "This way. Now. Don't say a word." Before Ben could react, Jimmy grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the private garage entrance. The heavy door closed behind them with a soft click. The garage was dimly lit, 5 luxury vehicles gleaming in the shadows, the Tesla's usual spot empty, the vintage Porsche, the Range Rover, the classic Mercedes, and in the far corner, Ben's pride, a midnight blue Bentley Continental GT. Jimmy yanked Ben toward the Bentley with desperate strength. He dropped to the concrete floor and pulled the billionaire down with him, dragging them both into the narrow space behind the luxury car, pressed against the garage's back wall. "What the hell?" Ben started, but Jimmy's hand clamped over his mouth. "Please," Jimmy whispered, his voice shaking with terror. "Trust me. Stay absolutely quiet. If they find you, we're both dead." "Dead?" Ben's mind reeled as they crouched behind the Bentley in the darkness, and he heard footsteps approaching from inside the house. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Ben Falcon's office occupied the entire top floor of the Falcon Tech Tower in downtown San Francisco. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the bay, the Golden Gate Bridge visible in the distance on clear days. At 55, Ben had spent 30 years building his empire from a single garage startup into a global technology corporation worth $3 billion. Software solutions, cloud infrastructure, artificial intelligence. Falcon Tech had its fingers in every corner of the digital revolution. His estate in Pacific Heights reflected that success. 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, manicured gardens that cascaded down the hillside, an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the bay itself. The wine cellar alone was worth $500,000, stocked with vintages from Bordeaux, Burgundy, and Napa Valley's finest estates. 5 cars sat in the climate-controlled garage, a Tesla Model S, a vintage Porsche 911, a Range Rover, a classic Mercedes convertible, and his pride, a midnight blue Bentley Continental GT. But for all his success in business, Ben's personal life carried shadows. His first wife, Jennifer, had died of breast cancer 4 years ago. They'd been married 23 years, college sweethearts who built the company together. Her death nearly destroyed him. For 18 months, Ben barely functioned, going through the motions while grief consumed him from the inside. Then Carly entered his life at a tech industry gala. 42 years old, strikingly beautiful, a corporate lawyer with a sharp mind and sharper wit. She understood his world of board meetings and acquisitions, could discuss market trends and legal strategies with equal fluency. She made him laugh again, made him feel alive. They married after a whirlwind 10-month courtship. 7 years later, their life looked perfect from the outside. Charity galas, vacation homes in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard, society pages featuring their carefully curated smiles. But Ben worked constantly, often 16-hour days, weekend meetings, international flights. He told himself he was building something, creating a legacy. The truth was simpler and sadder. Work was where he felt competent, where he understood the rules. At home, he moved to his own house like a ghost, barely noticing the staff who kept everything running smoothly. The housekeeper, the gardener, the part-time chef, they were invisible to him, just part of the machinery of his privileged life. Carly managed all of that. He signed the checks and never asked questions. He loved Carly, or thought he did. She was beautiful, poised, perfect for his public image. But if he was honest with himself, which he rarely was, he couldn't remember the last time they'd had a real conversation. The last time she looked at him with genuine warmth instead of that practiced smile she wore like expensive jewelry. But Ben didn't see that. He saw what he wanted to see. Success, stability, a life rebuilt after tragedy. He was a billionaire who could read a balance sheet in minutes, but couldn't read the people sleeping under his own roof. That blindness would nearly cost him everything. 8 months earlier, Jimmy Chin stood in the employment office of a San Francisco staffing agency, his resume feeling thin in his hands. 18 years old, no family, no safety net, just a culinary school certificate he'd earned while working 3 jobs simultaneously. His story wasn't unique, just heartbreaking in its ordinariness. Parents who immigrated from Hong Kong when he was a baby, working brutal hours in restaurant kitchens to give him opportunities they never had. His father collapsed from a heart attack during a dinner rush when Jimmy was 14. His mother lasted 2 more years before her body simply gave up, worn down by grief and exhaustion and 60-hour work weeks. Jimmy entered foster care at 16. 3 different homes in 2 years, none of them good. He learned quickly that survival meant being invisible, noticing everything while being noticed by no one. Where the anger was, where the danger was, how to read a room and disappear before trouble found you. He aged out of the system at 18 with $300 in savings and acceptance to a culinary school he couldn't afford. So he worked, morning prep cook at a diner in the Tenderloin, afternoon dishwasher at a hotel downtown, weekend catering gigs when he could find them. He slept 4 hours a night and attended classes in between shifts. His father's worn cookbook, the only inheritance he had. His culinary instructor, a kind woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, saw something in him. Talent, yes, but more than that, discipline, attention to detail, the ability to create beauty out of basic ingredients. When she heard about an opening for a private estate chef and gardener, she recommended Jimmy personally. The pay is exceptional, she told him. Room and board included. Mr. Falcon is a good man, a widower who appreciates quality. This could change your life. The interview lasted 15 minutes. Ben barely looked up from his phone, asked a few perfunctory questions about experience and availability. Carly did most of the talking, her eyes assessing Jimmy with the cold calculation of someone evaluating furniture. "You'll prepare breakfast and lunch daily," she said. "Dinner when we're entertaining. You'll also maintain the gardens." The previous gardener retired. "The apartment above the garage is yours. We value discretion and competence. Can you provide both?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then you start Monday." Jimmy moved into the small apartment. Small by state standards, palatial compared to foster homes and shared rooms he'd known. A bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, even a small living area. It was more space than he'd ever had to himself. The work was demanding, but not impossible. Carly had specific requirements. Green smoothies with exact measurements, egg white omelets, grilled fish with microgreens. Ben was easier, just wanted good food, and didn't micromanage. Jimmy learned their rhythms, their preferences, their schedules, and he noticed things. That's what invisible people do. They watch, they listen, they see what others miss. He noticed how Carly's smile changed the moment Ben left for work. How she had two phones, one she carried openly and one she kept hidden in her designer handbag. How her voice dropped to whispers when she made certain calls from the home office. He noticed expensive gifts that arrived, jewelry, designer clothes, that Ben never mentioned buying. The way Carly would disappear for hours, returning with explanations that sounded rehearsed. The cold distance in her eyes when she looked at her husband, like he was an obstacle instead of a partner. Jimmy kept his head down, did his work, stayed invisible. He'd learned in foster care that other people's drama was dangerous territory. Better to see nothing, say nothing, survive another day. But 3 months after he started working at the Falcon estate, Jimmy heard something he couldn't unhear. Something that would force him to choose between invisibility and courage, between saving himself and saving a man who barely noticed he existed. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late July. Ben was in New York for a week of meetings. Carly had dismissed Jimmy early, told him she wouldn't need dinner, take the evening off. Jimmy went to his apartment, but realized he'd left his phone in the kitchen. He returned quietly through the service entrance, not wanting to disturb Carly as she was entertaining guests. That's when he heard the voices drifting up through the floor vent that connected the wine cellar to the kitchen. The estate's old heating system carried sound to the ductwork with surprising clarity. The Seattle retreat, October 23rd. That's when we do it. Carly's voice, but stripped of its usual polished warmth. Cold, businesslike. Jimmy froze at the kitchen counter, his phone forgotten. You're absolutely certain about the timeline? A male voice, deep and unfamiliar. He goes to Seattle every October for the annual investor retreat. 3 days, same hotel, same routine for the past 5 years. He'll fly back Sunday evening, arrive home around 7 p.m. First thing he does, every single time, is go to the wine cellar to select bottles for the week. It's like clockwork. And the security system? I have the master codes. I'll disable the cameras remotely at 6:55 p.m. There's a 30-second reset window. You'll already be waiting in the cellar. When he comes down the stairs, you take the shot. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Take expensive bottles. Rough up the place. 1 shot to the head. Quick and clean. Jimmy's legs went weak. He gripped the counter to stay upright, his heart hammering so loudly he was certain they'd hear it. What about witnesses? Staff. The housekeeper has Sundays off. Always. The gardener. Carly's voice filled with contempt. That kid? He's nobody. Some foster orphan who's lucky to have a roof over his head. Even if he's around, he won't see anything. And who would believe him over me? I'm a respected lawyer, a grieving widow. He's a teenager with no family, no credibility. The life insurance? $30 million, double indemnity for accidental death. Plus the estate, the company shares, his investment portfolio. We're looking at close to $1 billion total. We split it 60-40 like we discussed. I play the devastated widow for 6 months. Then we disappear. Maldives, maybe? Somewhere without extradition. The male voice laughed, low and cruel. I always knew marrying that tech nerd would pay off eventually, Carly. Marcus. He's not as stupid as you think. We have to be perfect. No mistakes. No loose ends. Jimmy recognized the name. Marcus Webb. Ben had mentioned him once. A security consultant he'd fired 2 years ago for stealing client data. Now he was back, not for redemption but for murder. The voices moved away from the vent, becoming indistinct. Jimmy heard footsteps on the wine cellar stairs. A door closing. Then silence. He stood in that kitchen, trembling, his mind racing through options. Run. Pack his few belongings and disappear tonight. He'd done it before, could do it again. Find another city, another job, another anonymous life where nobody knew his name. But if he ran, Ben Falcon would die. Shot in his own wine cellar. His wife collecting billions while pretending to mourn. And Jimmy would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd done nothing. He thought about his father, who'd worked himself to death trying to provide a better life. His mother, who'd loved so fiercely even as grief consumed her. What would they tell him to do? Then he thought about something else. Who would believe him? An 18-year-old nobody accusing a billionaire's wife and a former security professional of planning murder? They'd laugh him out of the police station. Or worse, they'd tip off Carly, and Jimmy would become a loose end that needed tying up. No, if he was going to stop this, he needed evidence. Documentation so overwhelming that no one could dismiss it. He needed to build a case, not make an accusation. Jimmy pulled out his phone and started recording. For the next 3 months, he became a shadow with eyes and ears everywhere. He documented everything. October 22nd arrived with crisp autumn air and clear blue skies. Ben packed his overnight bag while Jimmy prepared breakfast. Egg white omelet with spinach, whole grain toast, black coffee. "I'll be back Sunday evening, around 7, Ben said, barely looking up from his phone. The usual. "Yes, sir. Safe travels." Ben kissed Carly goodbye in the foyer, a perfunctory peck that held no warmth. She smiled her practice smile, touched his arm, played the devoted wife one more time. The moment Ben's Tesla disappeared down the driveway, Carly's mask dropped. She made 3 calls on her secret phone, each one brief and coded. Jimmy caught fragments while trimming hedges near the window. Sunday, 7 p.m. Everything's ready. The wine cellar. Exactly as we planned. No changes now. We stick to the timeline. By noon, a black Range Rover pulled into the circular driveway. Marcus Webb stepped out. Tall, athletic, with cold eyes and a predator's confidence. He walked into the Falcon estate like he owned it. Jimmy was in the garden, hedge clippers in hand, invisible as always. He watched Marcus disappear inside and heard Carly's laugh echo from upstairs. They weren't even being careful anymore. Saturday was worse. Marcus stayed overnight, his vehicle parked brazenly in the driveway. Jimmy prepared lunch, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and left it in the kitchen. Carly barely acknowledged him, just waved him away like an inconvenient servant. "Take the rest of the day off. I won't eat dinner." Jimmy retreated to his apartment and pulled out his laptop. 3 months of documentation. 47 audio recordings of conversations between Carly and Marcus, time-stamped and geotagged. Photographs of them together in parking garages, cheap motels, her car parked outside his apartment. Screenshots of text messages from her burner phone. He caught her password one afternoon when she thought he wasn't watching. Bank records showing Carly draining joint accounts, transferring money to offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands. A complete timeline of the conspiracy, detailed and irrefutable. Sunday morning at 9:47 a.m., Jimmy sent everything to the FBI field office in San Francisco. Every recording, every photo, every document. He included a cover letter with the subject line, "Murder in progress urgent. Ben Falcon, tech billionaire, will be murdered tonight at 7 p.m. at his Pacific Heights estate. His wife, Carly Falcon, and Marcus Webb have planned his death for 3 months. I have documented everything. Please help. Lives are at stake." He hit send and waited. Hours crawled by. No response. Jimmy paced his small apartment, checking his phone every 30 seconds. Maybe they thought it was a prank. Maybe the email got lost in spam filters. Maybe he just signed his own death warrant for nothing. At 2:37 p.m., his phone finally rang. Unknown number. "Is this Jimmy Chen?" "Yes. This is Special Agent Sarah Morrison, FBI. We received your package this morning. We've been running verification all day. Your evidence is solid. Recordings, financials, everything. We're mobilizing a tactical team right now." Jimmy exhaled for the first time in hours. Ben's supposed to arrive at 7. They're planning to kill him in the wine cellar. "We know. We've read your timeline. We'll have agents in position by 6:30. I need you to listen carefully, Jimmy. Do not engage. Do not warn anyone. Act completely normal. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Stay in your apartment. Lock your door. Let us handle this. And Jimmy, what you did, building this case, documenting everything, that took real courage. You may have saved a man's life. The call ended. Jimmy sat on his bed, hands shaking, and waited for 7 o'clock. But Ben Falcon wasn't going to wait that long. Saturday night in Seattle, Ben Falcon ordered room service from a hotel restaurant. Sear halibut with wild mushroom risotto. He ate half, felt fine, and attended the evening reception. By midnight, his stomach was churning. By 2 a.m., he was violently ill, alternating between the bathroom and bed, sweating through his sheets. Food poisoning. Severe, debilitating, miserable. Sunday morning, still weak and pale, Ben made the decision. He couldn't sit through another day of investor meetings in this condition. He needed his own bed, his own bathroom, his own space to recover. He booked a 10 a.m. flight home, packed his bag with trembling hands, and checked out early. He tried calling Carly 3 times to let her know he was coming home early. Each call went straight to voicemail. She probably turned off her phone to sleep in, something she did on weekends. Fine. He'd surprise her. Maybe they'd actually spend a quiet evening together for once. The flight was torture. Every bump of turbulence made his stomach lurch. Ben spent most of it in the airplane bathroom, apologizing to annoyed passengers. When the plane finally landed at SFO at 5:47 p.m., he was exhausted but relieved to be home. He collected his bag, walked to the terminal, and caught a rideshare. The driver mercifully didn't attempt conversation during the 40-minute drive to Pacific Heights. At 6:28 p.m., the rideshare pulled up to Ben's estate. The circular driveway was empty except for Carly's Mercedes. The house glowed with warm lights. Everything looked peaceful and normal. Ben had no idea that inside his house, a man with a silenced pistol was waiting in his wine cellar, that his wife had just disabled the security cameras. FBI agents were positioned 2 blocks away, waiting for 7 p.m. when he was supposed to arrive. He paid the driver, grabbed his overnight bag, and walked toward the front entrance. That's when the side door burst open and Jimmy appeared, moving with desperate speed. Mr. Falcon. The young man's voice was urgent, terrified. This way. Now. Don't say a word. Before Ben could respond, Jimmy grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the garage entrance. The heavy door closed behind them with a soft click. The garage was dimly lit, 5 luxury vehicles gleaming in the shadows. Jimmy yanked Ben toward the midnight blue Bentley in the far corner with desperate strength. He dropped to the concrete floor and pulled the billionaire down with him, dragging them both into the narrow space behind the luxury car, wedging them against the back wall. What the hell? Ben started, but Jimmy's hand clamped over his mouth. Please, Jimmy whispered, his voice shaking with terror. Trust me. Stay absolutely quiet. If they find you, we're both dead. Dead? Ben's mind reeled, trying to process. This was his home. His safe, secure, $1 million estate. What was Jimmy talking about? Then he heard it. The door from the house to the garage opened. Footsteps. And a voice that made his blood run cold. Marcus, he's here. I just saw the rideshare drop him off early. Carly, his wife. But her voice carried an edge he'd never heard before. Sharp, panicked, dangerous. Where is he? A male voice, unfamiliar and harsh. He should have gone straight to the wine cellar. I don't know. His bag's in the foyer, but I can't find him. Check the garage. Behind the Bentley, pressed against concrete with an 18-year-old's hand over his mouth, Ben Falcon began to understand that his perfect life was built on lies, and that the young man he'd barely noticed might be the only thing standing between him and a bullet. Jimmy's apartment keys bit into his palm as he gripped them, the only potential weapon he had. Behind the Bentley, crouched in the narrow space between the luxury car and the garage's back wall, He could hear everything happening in the adjoining spaces. Ben's green eyes were wide with shock and confusion, his body rigid with fear. Jimmy slowly released his hand from the billionaire's mouth, fingered to his lips in a desperate plea for silence. Ben nodded, understanding even if he didn't comprehend. Check every room. Carly's voice echoed from the house, no longer honey-sweet but cold as winter steel. He's here somewhere. That rideshare definitely dropped him off. The security feed? Marcus's voice, professional and calm. I disabled it at 6:55 like I planned. We have no visuals. Then we search manually. He can't have gotten far. Start with the upstairs. Through the gap between the Bentley and the garage wall, Jimmy could see the door to the house. Any moment, someone could enter. The garage had overhead lights, but they weren't on. The only illumination came from the twilight filtering through high windows. The Bentley's dark blue paint made their hiding spot even darker. Footsteps moved through the house. Kitchen, living room, office. Jimmy and Ben stayed frozen, barely breathing. The garage remained quiet, untouched. For now, Ben's face showed the progression of understanding. Confusion giving way to horror, horror to disbelief, disbelief to shattering recognition. His hands trembled. Jimmy touched his arm gently. Stay calm, stay quiet, stay alive. Minutes passed. From the house, they could hear doors opening and closing, Carly's increasingly frustrated voice calling out to Marcus. Upstairs is clear. The office is clear. Where the hell is he? His bag is in the foyer. He came inside, checked the guest rooms again. I already checked. Then checked the basement, the wine cellar. Maybe you went down there already. If he'd gone to the cellar, you would have taken the shot. He's somewhere else. The arguing continued, giving Jimmy and Ben precious minutes. Jimmy pulled out his phone, hand trembling. He texted the number Agent Morrison had called from. He's home early. 6:28 p.m. We're hiding behind Bentley and garage. They're searching house. Please help. The message was delivered. No response. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Then his phone vibrated. Hold position. Team moving in now. Do not engage. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. They had to stay alive and hidden for 5 more minutes. The door from the house to the garage opened. Jimmy's heart stopped. Through the narrow gap beside the Bentley, he watched Marcus Webb step into the garage, a silenced pistol held professionally in both hands. The man moved like a predator, checking corners, scanning for movement. Ben saw the gun. His whole body went rigid with terror. Jimmy squeezed his arm. Don't move, don't breathe, don't exist. Marcus approached the vehicle slowly, methodically. Tesla, empty parking spot. The vintage Porsche. The Range Rover. Each one checked, cleared, moving closer. The garage lighting was dim but not dark. If Marcus looked carefully at the Bentley, if he moved to the right angle, anything. Carly's voice in the doorway, impatient and sharp. Not yet. You're sure he came inside? I saw him walk toward the front entrance with his bag. He has to be somewhere. Marcus holstered his weapon temporarily, pulling out his phone. I'm checking the exterior cameras. Maybe he went around the side of the house. The cameras are disabled, not the perimeter ones. Those are on a different system. He tapped his screen, scrolling through feeds. Wait! Here, 6:28. Rideshare drops him off. He walks to the front door with his bag, opens a door, and that's where our coverage stops because you killed the interior feeds. So he's inside. We just need to find him. What about the gardener? Where's the kid? Behind the Bentley. Jimmy felt Ben's hand find his and grip it hard. Jimmy? Carly's voice dripped with contempt. I haven't seen him since yesterday. He's probably hiding in his apartment, like always. The boy's terrified of his own shadow. Besides, who would believe some orphan over me? Marcus moved closer to the Bentley, his eyes scanning. You better hope that kid didn't see or hear anything. He's nobody, Marcus. A foster kid with no family, no credibility, no future. Even if he saw something, which he didn't, he's too scared to do anything about it. Footsteps approached their hiding spot. Marcus was 3 feet from the Bentley's rear bumper, 2 feet, moving to the side where he'd have a clear view. Sirens. Distant but growing closer. Marcus froze. What is that? Police? Carly's voice pitched higher with panic. That's impossible. How would they? Multiple vehicles. They're coming this way. Marcus pulled out his weapon again, no longer searching the garage, but focused on the threat outside. We need to leave. Now! I can't just leave. If the police find me here with you, then I'm gone. You stay and play innocent. Marcus, wait. But he was already moving, running toward the garage's side exit that led to the exterior grounds. The door opened and closed. His footsteps faded into gardens. Carly stood in the garage doorway, her perfect world collapsing around her. The sirens grew louder, closer. Red and blue lights began to flash through the garage windows. She looked around frantically, her eyes passing over the Bentley, without really seeing it. Her mind was already spinning new lies, new stories, new performances. She smoothed her hair, wiped her eyes, and transformed. Her face rearranged itself into an expression of fear and confusion. The frightened wife who has no idea what's happening. The main garage door rolled open. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons drawn, red laser sights painting the walls. Hands where we can see them. Carly raised her hands, her voice trembling perfectly. Oh, thank God you're here. Someone broke into our home. I heard voices, strange men. My husband, he's supposed to arrive soon. Please, you have to help. Carly Falcon? Yes, but how did you? You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and wire fraud. What? This is insane. I'm the victim here. There was a man with a gun. 2 agents moved toward her, handcuffs ready. Carly's performance was flawless. Shock, tears, desperate confusion. She was still playing the role, still believing her acting could save her. There's been a terrible mistake, she insisted. My husband will tell you. Ben will explain everything. He'll be home any minute. Your husband, a woman's voice said from the garage entrance, is already here. Special Agent Sarah Morrison stepped into the garage, her eyes scanning the vehicles until they found the Bentley. Mr. Falcon? Jimmy? It's safe now. You can come out. Behind the Bentley, Jimmy and Ben slowly emerged from their hiding spot. Both men were covered in dust from the concrete floor, shaking, traumatized, but alive. Carly's face when she saw Ben was something Jimmy would never forget. The performance cracked, just for a second, revealing shock beneath the mask. Then the actress returned, tears streaming down her face. Ben. Oh my God, Ben, are you okay? This man, Marcus, broke in. He threatened me, forced me to help him. I was terrified. I was going to warn you the second you got home. I was trying to protect you. Stop. Ben's voice was quiet, but it cut through her performance like a blade. Just stop, Carly. The garage filled with more FBI agents, securing the perimeter, documenting the scene. 2 agents held Carly's arms as another read her rights. She ignored them, eyes locked on Ben, still trying to manipulate, still play her role. You have to believe me. I love you. I would never. I heard you, Ben said, his voice hollow. Back there, behind the car, I heard every word. How boring I was. Oblivious. Pathetic. How you've been playing a devoted wife for 7 years, waiting for your payday. Carly's tears stopped. The mask began to slip. Special Agent Morrison approached Ben and Jimmy. Mr. Falcon, are you injured? Ben shook his head, unable to take his eyes off his wife. And you must be Jimmy Chun, Morrison said, turning to the young man. We received your evidence package this morning. 47 recordings, extensive financial documentation, photographic evidence. Your work was exceptional. You built a prosecutable federal case. I learned to notice things, Jimmy said quietly, to see what people think nobody sees. You did more than notice. You saved a life. Across the garage, Carly had abandoned her tears. What remained was cold calculation, her lawyer's mind already spinning for angles and leverage. She looked at Jimmy with pure hatred. You, she spat. You did this. You little snitch. I stopped you, Jimmy replied calmly. There's a difference. You're nothing. Nobody. Some orphan who should be grateful for scraps. Do you think this changes anything? You think you matter now? He matters to me, Ben said quietly. His voice was hoarse, but steady. He had the courage to see what I was too blind to see. He risked everything to save my life. That matters more than anything you've ever done. Carly laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Courage? He spied and recorded like a coward instead of confronting us like a man. And you, she turned to Ben with pure venom. You deserved everything that was coming. You were always too stupid to see what was right in front of you. Too desperate to be loved to recognize that I never loved you. Not for a single second. The words hit Ben like physical blows. His face crumpled. I married you for your money, Carly continued, her voice rising. For your pathetic desperation and your fat bank accounts. You were an easy mark, a grieving widower so grateful someone would touch him again that he'd believe anything. 7 years I played this role. 7 years of pretending your boring tech talk was interesting, that your vanilla sex was satisfying, that your need for real connection was anything but nauseating weakness. That's enough, Agent Morrison said sharply. But Carly wasn't finished. You want to know the truth, Ben? I've been with Marcus for 6 years. Almost our entire marriage. Every business trip you took, every late night at the office. We were together, laughing about what a fool you were, how easy it would be to take everything you built and leave you dead in your precious wine cellar. Ben's legs gave out. He sat heavily on the concrete floor, his face gray. Jimmy moved to his side immediately, a hand on his shoulder. We'll see who wins in court, Carly snarled as the agents began leading her away. I have the best lawyers money can buy. Money I earned putting up with you. You'll have a public defender, Agent Morrison said calmly. All your assets are frozen as of 1 hour ago. Joint accounts, offshore holdings, everything. The evidence Jimmy provided included your financial crimes. Wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. You're not buying anything. Carly's face went white. Finally, truly afraid, as they walked her toward the waiting vehicles. She looked back one final time. Not at Ben, at Jimmy. You destroyed my life, she said. Jimmy thought about his parents who'd worked themselves to death, about 14 foster homes where he'd learned to survive, about 3 months of living in fear, documenting evil, choosing courage over safety. No, he said quietly. You destroyed your own life. I just refused to let you destroy his. Carly screamed something else. But the agents pulled her away, her voice fading as they took her through the house toward the driveway where cameras flashed and neighbors whispered. The garage fell silent, except for Ben's ragged breathing. Jimmy knelt beside him on the concrete, this 18-year-old who'd saved a billionaire's life, and said nothing. Sometimes there are no words for the moment when your entire world shatters. Agent Morrison gave them space for a moment before approaching. We'll need comprehensive statements from both of you. But for tonight, let's get you somewhere safe. Your home is a crime scene. Ben looked up at her with hollow eyes. Where do I go? I've arranged a hotel suite. Both of you, you shouldn't be alone tonight. As they stood to leave, Ben looked at Jimmy, really looked at him, seeing him fully for the first time. You knew for 3 months? Yes, sir. You could have run, could have disappeared. I could have, but you gave me a chance when I was nobody. Treated me with respect. I couldn't let you die. Ben's eyes filled with tears. This 55-year-old billionaire who'd built an empire, who'd survived his first wife's death, who'd been blind to so much, stood in his garage and wept. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I never even saw you. Not really. You were just the help, just part of the background." "I know," Jimmy said gently. "That's what made me useful. Invisible people see everything." Outside, vehicles departed with Carly and the evidence. The sun had set completely, leaving only the harsh garage lights and the flashing blues and reds of law enforcement. Agent Morrison handed them both cards. "Hotel address is here. I'll meet you there in 2 hours for preliminary statements. The full depositions can wait until tomorrow." As they walked toward the waiting vehicle, Ben put his hand on Jimmy's shoulder, not as an employer, as something else entirely. Something neither of them had a name for yet, but they would. The trial lasted 6 weeks and became a media sensation. The tech billionaire's wife plots his murder for insurance money. The orphan gardener who documented everything. Marcus Webb's plea deal testimony detailing every conversation, every plan, every cold calculation. The prosecution presented Jimmy's evidence methodically, audio recording after audio recording. Carly's voice laying out the murder plot with businesslike precision. Photographs of her with Marcus in motels, parking garages, his apartment. Bank records showing systematic theft. $4.7 million transferred to offshore accounts over 2 years. Text messages from her burner phone discussing the hit, the insurance payout, getting rid of the problem. 3 shots to the head. The prosecutor played one recording for the jury. "Make sure he's dead. No mistakes. I want to see his brains on the wine cellar floor." The courtroom went silent. Several jurors looked physically ill. Carly's defense attorneys tried everything. They claimed Marcus had manipulated her, coerced her, that she was a victim too. But the recordings destroyed that narrative. Her voice on those tapes was clear, enthusiastic, often the one pushing for more violent details. They tried to discredit Jimmy, just a teenager, biased, probably doctored evidence. But FBI forensic analysis confirmed every recording's authenticity. Timestamps matched. Metadata was unaltered. The evidence was ironclad. Marcus Webb, facing life without parole, took a plea deal. 25 years in exchange for full testimony. He sat on the witness stand for 3 days, detailing how Carly had contacted him a year after Ben fired him, how she'd seduced him, promised him millions, spent months planning the perfect murder. She wanted it to look like a robbery, Marcus testified, but she also wanted him to suffer. She talked about making sure he knew she betrayed him before he died. That was important to her, that he died knowing he'd been a fool. Ben sat through every day of testimony. Jimmy sat beside him, a silent presence of support. The media called them an unlikely pair. The billionaire and the orphan, linked by attempted murder and salvation. When Carly took the stand in her own defense, she was polished professional, playing the role of wronged wife one more time. She claimed the recordings were taken out of context, that Marcus had threatened her family, except she had no family, that she'd been planning to go to the police, but was too afraid. The prosecutor destroyed her in cross-examination. "Mrs. Falcon, you testified that you were afraid of Marcus Webb. Is that correct?" "Yes." Yet in this recording from September 12th, you can be heard laughing while discussing your husband's murder. Does that sound like fear to you? Silence. "Mrs. Falcon, you transferred $4.7 million to offshore accounts. Can you explain why a frightened, coerced victim would be stealing from her husband?" I was planning to run, to escape. Without telling your husband he was in danger? Without going to the police? You just stole millions and planned to run after he was murdered, and you collected his life insurance. I was confused. I wasn't thinking clearly. No further questions. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. The judge sentenced her to 40 years to life in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 25 years. Mrs. Falcon, you betrayed the most fundamental trust that exists between human beings. You planned your husband's murder with cold calculation over months, motivated purely by greed. This court finds your actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum sentence allowed by law. As bailiffs led her away in shackles, Carly looked back one final time. Her eyes found Jimmy's across the crowded courtroom. I hope it was worth it, she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. It was, Jimmy replied. A man's life? Always worth it. Carly's face twisted with rage and she lunged toward him, but the bailiffs held her firm. She screamed something incoherent as they dragged her toward the door. Her perfect composure finally shattered completely. The courtroom doors closed. She was gone. Ben stood slowly, his face showing a toll of 6 weeks reliving his betrayal. Jimmy stood with him, and together they walked out into the afternoon sun, where reporters waited with cameras and questions. Mr. Falcon, how do you feel about the verdict? Mr. Falcon, will you pursue civil action? Jimmy, what made you decide to document the conspiracy? Agent Morrison appeared, creating a path through the crowd. Gentlemen, the vehicle is this way. As they drove away from the courthouse, Ben stared out the window at the city passing by. It's over, he said quietly. The trial is, Jimmy agreed, but everything else? That's just the beginning. Ben looked at him, this 18-year-old who'd saved his life and changed everything. What do you mean? You get to decide who you are now, not who she made you, not who you were before, who you choose to be. Ben smiled, the first real smile in weeks. When did you get so wise? Foster care teaches you fast. You either learn to see clearly or you don't survive. Well, Ben said, I want to start seeing clearly. Starting now. 3 months after Carly's sentencing, Ben stood in family court. The room was much smaller than the criminal courthouse, quieter, less dramatic. Judge Patricia Chun reviewed the paperwork with careful attention. Mr. Falcon, you're petitioning to legally adopt James Chun? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Chun is 18 years old, legally an adult. Why adoption rather than, say, a scholarship or employment arrangement? Ben looked at Jimmy, who sat beside him in a suit they'd picked out together. Because he's already my son in every way that matters. He saved my life, yes. But more than that, he showed me what I'd been missing. What real courage looks like. What integrity means. I lost my first wife to cancer. I almost lost my life to greed. In between those tragedies, I was given a gift I almost didn't recognize. This young man doesn't need my money. He needs what I need, family. Judge Chin turned to Jimmy. And you want this? Jimmy's eyes were wet. For 18 years, he'd been alone, bouncing between foster homes, sleeping in cars, working 3 jobs just to survive, learning to be invisible because visibility meant danger. And now a billionaire was asking a court to make him a son. I've been alone since I was 16, Jimmy said, his voice steady despite the emotion. I've lived in shelters, foster homes, my car. I've been invisible my whole life. Ben sees me, really sees me, not as a project or charity, as a son. Yes, Your Honor. I want this more than anything. Judge Chin smiled. Adoption granted. Mr. Falcon, Mr. Chin, congratulations. You're officially family. In the hallway afterward, Ben pulled Jimmy into a hug. Neither man said anything. Some moments don't need words. 6 months later, they stood together on a platform overlooking the bay. Behind them, a new building gleamed in the afternoon sun. Modern architecture of glass and steel, with commercial kitchens at rival 5-star restaurants, classrooms equipped with the latest technology, and dormitories for students who needed housing. Ben addressed the crowd of press, industry professionals, and the first 30 scholarship recipients. The Falcon Institute of Culinary Arts exists for one purpose: to provide full scholarships and comprehensive support to young people from foster care, homeless youth, and anyone who's ever been told they were nobody. Because my son taught me that the people we overlook are often the ones with the most to offer. Jimmy cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. The students, teenagers and young adults who looked like younger versions of himself, applauded with the enthusiasm of people who'd just been given a chance they'd thought impossible. Later, they found themselves in one of the teaching kitchens. Ben was examining the commercial stoves with the same careful attention. He gave quarterly reports while Jimmy arranged utensils and prep stations. "You didn't have to build all this," Jimmy said, not for the first time. "Yes, I did," Ben replied, "also not for the first time. You showed me that the people we ignore, the ones we walk past every day without seeing, they're often the ones with the most courage, the most heart. I spent 55 years being blind to everything but profit margins and stock prices. I don't want to waste whatever time I have left." They worked side by side in comfortable silence, setting up for tomorrow's first classes. Jimmy would teach 3 days a week while finishing his own degree. Ben would oversee operations, using his business skills to ensure the institute not only survived but thrived. "The first class is Introduction to Basic Techniques," Jimmy said, reviewing the schedule. "Knife skills, stocks, mother sauces. The fundamentals my father taught me. He'd be proud of you. I think he'd be proud of both of us." That evening, they sat on the terrace at the estate. Ben's home, Jimmy's home now too. The house had been thoroughly cleaned after serving as a crime scene, but Ben had still replaced the wine cellar's entire door and staircase. Some memories couldn't be scrubbed away, only built over. The sun painted the bay in brilliant colors, gold and crimson and deep purple. A sailboat moved slowly across the water, its white sail catching the last light of day. "Do you think about it?" Ben asked. "What would have happened if you hadn't overheard them that day in July?" "Sometimes," Jimmy admitted, "but I try not to live in what-ifs. If I come home at 7 like scheduled, I'd be dead. If you hadn't documented everything, they might have gotten away with it. If my car hadn't broken down. No, wait, that was the other story." Jimmy laughed. "If you hadn't gotten food poisoning." "Right. Food poisoning saved my life. The universe has a strange sense of humor. My father used to say that life is like cooking. You can follow a recipe perfectly and still get surprised by how it turns out. The secret is adapting, tasting, adjusting as you go." Ben smiled. "Wise man, your father. He was. I wish you could have met him." "I think I did," Ben said quietly. "In you. Every day." They sat in silence as the sun disappeared into Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. A billionaire and a foster kid who become father and son. An employer who'd never noticed and an employee who'd saved his life. Two people who'd found family in the wreckage of betrayal. Jimmy thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that July afternoon in the kitchen when he'd first heard Carly planning murder, to 3 months of living in fear while documenting evidence, to hiding behind a Bentley while listening to his employer's wife orchestrate death, to this moment on a terrace watching the sunset as a son, not a servant. "You know what I think about most?" Jimmy said, "Not the scary parts. Not hiding behind the car or the trial. I think about the choice." "What choice?" "In July, when I overheard them, I had a choice, run and save myself, or stay and try to save you. I chose to stay. And that choice led to everything else. The FBI, the adoption, the institute, us sitting here. One choice. I'm grateful you made it." "Me too." Ben raised his glass. "To choices, and to see clearly. To family," Jimmy added. "The one you find, not the one you're born into." They touched glasses as the first stars appeared overhead. Somewhere in a federal prison, Carly was spending her first year of a 40-year sentence, probably still believing she'd been the victim, still unable to see that her own greed had destroyed her. But here, on this terrace overlooking the bay, two people who'd saved each other sat together in peace. Ben had learned that wealth meant nothing if you couldn't see the people around you, that the most important person in his life had been invisible to him for months. That family wasn't about blood or tradition, but about who chose to show up when everything fell apart. Jimmy had learned that invisibility could be a superpower when used to protect instead of just survive. That courage sometimes meant staying when every instinct screamed to run. That the terrified boy who'd aged out of foster care could become someone's son. The first students arrive tomorrow, Ben said. Are you nervous? Terrified. Jimmy admitted with a smile. What if I'm a terrible teacher? You documented a federal conspiracy for 3 months under the noses of 2 people planning murder. You were behind a car with a billionaire while his wife searched for him with a loaded gun. You testified in front of a packed courtroom. You can handle teaching knife skills to teenagers. When you put it that way, they laughed, and the sound carried across the terrace into the night. Below them, San Francisco glittered with lights. The Golden Gate Bridge glowed orange in the distance. The bay reflected the stars. Sometimes the person who saved your life is the one you never noticed. Sometimes courage comes in the form of a quiet young man with a recording device and determination. Sometimes family isn't about blood, but about who chooses to stand beside you when your world collapses. And sometimes, the worst day of your life, the day you discover your wife wants you dead, the day you hide behind a car in your own garage fearing for your life, becomes a first day of something better, something true, something worth every painful step of the journey. Ben and Jimmy sat together as night fell completely, father and son not by birth, but by choice. And in that choice, they both found what they'd been missing all along. Not wealth, not status, not the perfect life that looked good from the outside. Just family. Real, honest, hard-won family. And that was worth more than any fortune a billionaire could build. If you made it this far, drop a comment below. Would you have had the courage to stay and document like Jimmy did? Or would you have run to save yourself? What would you have done differently? This story shows us that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones with the most courage. If this moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more incredible true stories of courage, redemption, and the moments that change everything. See you in the next story.